Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the New Hampshire Food Alliance December webinar. I'm Erin Hale, a Research and Network Coordinator with the New Hampshire Food Alliance. And as many of you know, the Alliance is a statewide network that connects people, ideas, and resources across the food system in New Hampshire. We work with partners all over the state on shared goals and strategies designed to build a food system that works for all people, communities, businesses, and the environment. Our work is currently focused on strengthening and supporting farm fish and food enterprises while expanding access to local food and protecting our land and water resources through our Viability Initiative. This last September, our most active network partners met for a day-long strategic retreat to think about how best to collaborate and advance our common goals. And across the board, we heard from partners that they'd like to see the network get involved in helping to shape food policy at the local and state levels. By using our collective voice, we can help to ensure that our institutions, legislators, and local and state governments are helping to support and grow our local food economy as well. So this is new territory for our network. So we're embarking into the world of policy by doing a lot of learning and listening. And we're so thankful to have our guest presenters here today to help us better understand how some of our network partners are already engaging in policy, what their priorities are, and how we can get involved. And because the landscape of food policy is so vast, we've decided to focus today on learning about policy specifically related to agriculture and food production. We'll host another webinar related to food access and hunger and other issues in the winter. So to help us, we have today Rob Johnson, a farmer and New Hampshire Farm Bureau Policy Director. We have Sarah Lang-Gilliatt, the owner of Main Street Cheese and the policy chair for NOFA New Hampshire. And we have Lori Restino, an attorney and principal of Strategies for a Sustainable Future. She's also a visiting professor of law at George Washington University. So thank you all for being here with us today. We're going to start off with Rob Johnson from the New Hampshire Farm Bureau, and I'm going to let our presenters introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about themselves before they jump into their presentation as well. So thanks, Rob, and welcome. All right, let's see, let's make sure we can get Rob unmuted here. All right, so Rob.
Yes.
Great, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Johnson, and I'm in my 18th year with the New Hampshire Farm Bureau. Prior to that, I was with the New Hampshire House for a dozen years, half of that on staff, and the other half of that as an elected officer. I have my degree, bachelor's degree in political science from the University of New Hampshire. I live in Pittsfield, and with my wife and young adult sons, we have a small diversified farm where we raise beef cattle, put up hay and forage, a small pick your own blueberry operation. We raise turkeys for Thanksgiving and maple syrup. With that, I will, if you could go to the next slide, Aaron. Tell you a little bit about New Hampshire Farm Bureau. We're a nonprofit federation established in 1916. We have currently a staff of 3 full-time, a director and a communications person, myself, and a support staff person. And then in the summers, we have an intern to help out with things, and we have a budget approaching $500,000 a year. Farm Bureau itself was established back in around the country in about 100 years ago. We celebrated in New Hampshire our 100th anniversary last year. And it came out, but the reason we have the name Bureau is that the very first Farm Bureau was the Brome County Farm Bureau, just outside of, in the Binghamton, New York area, and it was a bureau of the Chamber of Commerce. So that's where we've got the Bureau name. And at that time, and there was a movement around the country where that's when county extension agents were first established. And in order to show a support for essentially a need for a county agent in a county, there had to be you had to establish that there was interest, and one way that they did that was the establishment of county farm bureau organizations. So that we had a very strong, and always have had a very strong tie to cooperative extension. And in its early years, Farm Bureau was much more of an educational and marketing organization. And over the years, we've turned to more where I guess our bread and butter, you'd say, is the advocacy side of things. Of our currently, we have it's close to 3,200 member families. About half of those are what you would call farmer members, and the other half are supporting members, but they're family memberships, and we do have a few where there are businesses and individuals. For the most part, were our family members, and as I've said, we're dedicated to advocating for and also educating the public about agriculture. And one of the major ways we have for a number of years educated the public about agriculture is through we house and support the New Hampshire Agriculture in the Classroom program, which is geared towards fourth grade students and particularly providing the services to teachers at that level to educate their students about agriculture in the state. And we are a general farm organization, and by that we mean we represent all sectors of the industry, dairy, livestock, horticulture, poultry, you name it, across the whole spectrum. And we do have and I'll be talking much more to this, but an established policy development process that we believe when we advocate, decision makers know that our positions have been vetted by our membership. Next slide, please, Aaron. This is a little schematic of our policy process, and it's very much simplified, but it all starts out with an idea. And that idea, in order to get it formally into our Farm Bureau policy, it can be either brought to a state committee, and we have a number of those, what we call either commodity committees, dairy, livestock, horticulture, that type of thing, or just general committees, our government affairs committee, and we also have a state policy development committee. So the idea can go there, or it can go be brought up at our county annual meeting. And each fall, each county farm bureau holds an annual meeting where there's the county offices are elected, but also that's a place where any member with a policy idea raises it and it's voted on. And then any policies then they first go to a policy development committee, and our state level policy development committee, it consists of our board of directors, Federation board of directors, any chairs of our state committees, and also county policy development chairs. And often prior to, on the scheme here, prior to an idea going to a county annual meeting or to a state committee, at the county level, they will have policy meetings and vet things there. And then what basically the purpose of the state policy development committee is to, oftentimes we'll get resolutions that are worded in such that they'd be challenging, to say the least, to put in a document. So they're reworded slightly formatted for our policy. And also we often have more than one, sometimes 3 or 4 policies that speak to the same subject. So we'll consolidate them in most cases. Sometimes we won't if for different reasons. And then once those are then sent to what do we call our House of Delegates at our annual meeting, which is held right around usually Veterans Day or thereabouts that weekend in November. And it's at that meeting that our delegates, which our delegates are are the elected representatives from each of the county farm bureau, and they elect the federation officers, president. And we have a one first vice president, two second vice presidents, and a treasurer. That's the executive committee, which along with the chair of our Young Farmer Committee and Associated Women's Organization, and then all of the county farm bureau presidents or a representative. That's the board of directors. But at this meeting, the delegates of the county farm bureaus organizations, they elect the officers of the organization, and they vote on the resolutions, and they set policy for the coming year. Next slide, please. Okay, this shows you a slide of a picture of our president, Dennis Ward, in the blue shirt, the testimony table. He is testifying on what was Senate Bill 491 last year, which was the bill relative to the Food Safety Modernization Act, particularly the produce safety rule. And what the bill did was put the responsibility for the produce safety rule in the Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food. It had been in the Department of Health and Human Services, and we very much believe that the Department of Agriculture personnel, they understand agriculture and New Hampshire farmers, and they should be the overseer of this program, consisting of officials going on to farms. So they were best suited to understand the rule and work with New Hampshire farmers. Our president, Dennis, he's recently retired, but he was the herd manager at Hatchland Dairy in North Haverhill, and prior to that, he had his own dairy operation for a number of years. And you'll see at the hearing in the background, the gentleman standing with the papers kind of under the clock. Tyler Hardy is a member of ours, and he also is president of the New Hampshire Fruit Growers. He was there, and right near him is, you'll see Roger Noonan, and many of you may know Roger as president of the New England Farmers Union. Rogers also has been a number of years on the board of directors on the Hillsborough County Farm Bureau, and very active in our policy process. And then you also see a gentleman seated at the table right under the lamp with the beard, and that is Howard Pearl. And he's I believe last session he was the only full-time farming legislator, and Howard sits on our Federation board as its treasurer. Next slide. Yeah, there's much of the heart and soul of Farm Bureau is the work in the counties, and had a picture of just a county meeting. The counties are the heart of Farm Bureau work. Each county is represented on our board. The Federation Board of Directors. The counties, for the most part, there's no paid staff, but they do a number of things. For example, in Grafton County, the Grafton County Farm Bureau, they pay for an individual as an agriculture and a classroom coordinator, and works with the schools in Grafton County. They also have a very important role in our policy process. For example, Cheshire and Sullivan County Farm Bureau come to mind, and they annually hold a dinner with their area legislators. And for example, the Sullivan County meeting, it's held usually for the last number of years. They've had a dinner at Stuart and John's Sugar House in Westmoreland, and it's a great opportunity for the local county farm bureau members to meet one-on-one with legislators. And the counties also do a number of other things, put on over activities, including tractor safety classes geared more to young folks, children and teenagers. And the Merrimack County Farm Bureau over the years has held an annual meeting with personnel from the Department of Safety, where they go over the rules and regulations for farm plates and agricultural plates and that type of thing. And it just is, like I say, I can't stress enough that the work is done at the county level. And if you try the next slide, see if we can get it up here. this next slide, I believe it's how to get involved in the organization. I'm gonna.
So Rob, I just want to let you know I'm hearing from other folks that the slides are advancing. Folks have said.
Yeah. Okay. The problem is I can't see them.
Okay. So I think they're seeing the how to get involved slide with some of the examples. Maybe we could move on to the next slide, since we are running a little low on time, since we need to
okay.
move on.
Okay. The next. Okay. After the how to get involved, there should be a picture of former Governor John Lynch on a stump, and that was to give you an example of the type of events that we hold every other year on election year. We get together with the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association. We work very closely with them. Our membership very much overlaps. I work very closely with their director, Jason Stock, in the legislature. And what we do is, as part of our summer membership picnic, which is a picnic, we get a tent and tour a farm, and then we always focus on one race. And what the photo you're seeing, hopefully, is a year we invited the gubernatorial candidates, and the Timberland owners bring in a stump, and we have hay and flowers around it, and we ask them to speak to us for 5 minutes. And then we ask them to take questions, and it's a great way to informally meet and mingle with our future decision makers. And we put a lot into that, and I think it works well. Next slide.
All right. So
all right. Yeah, this is I believe it's titled our
policy priorities.
Yes. Yes. I'm just trying to remember what's on it there. We essentially have what are our cornerstone policy priorities that every year, every session, we're always following, and one of them is our current use program. I attend every current use board meeting, and current use is the cornerstone of allowing our farmers to have the land that they need to farm in this state without high assessments forcing them to sell their land. So that's a real key priority for us, and we spend a lot of time on it. And just on a side, actually, the current use program is currently rewriting their rules, and there'll be public forums on that coming up next week. And so that it's a rewrite. It's an update for the most part of the rules. So we've been very much engaged in that. Our other cornerstone priorities are the programming through UNH, whether it be the College of Life Sciences and Agriculture or Cooperative Extension. We regularly meet with Dean Race at Coulter and Dean LaValle at Extension, and their people, and that is a key for our members. Continually tell us a strong programming through Cooperative Extension is important. And a few years ago, Extension went through a rebranding, so to speak, repositioning, I guess it was called. And I remember at the time what we were we focused on, that we needed that there'd be an agricultural presence in each county was very important. And another cornerstone priority has always been for us is the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture and funding there and personnel there. For example, this coming session, the commissioner has requested another person to assist Gail Jelly with their marketing efforts. And that'll be key because Gail will be retiring in the not too distant future, and to have somebody in there to work with her for a little bit of time will be key. I also listed some RSAs that are very important, key to agriculture in the state. RSA 2134-A is the definition of agriculture and farming. There will be legislation to tweak it this year, but that's something, and we in recent years have been very much involved with that through the defining agritourism. and we when we worked on that, our membership told us that agritourism is marketing our farm, so we made sure that it reflected that. The other two, the right to farm is also a biggie. You may have heard in some other states they are having some issues with their right to farm statutes, and particularly as it applies to larger farm operations. So we're always have our eyes open for changes to that. And then the other one in recent years has been the RSA 644-8, which is the cruelty to animals statute. And that's important. The concern we have there is that in today's world, there are many people don't understand production agriculture, and sometimes it can lead to problems with issues with the animal care, that type of thing. So we always want to make sure that the statute enables, and it recognizes that. As far as priorities this coming year, there'll be legislation that the Commissioner of Agriculture is working on with a number of stakeholders for a dairy premium program. And what it does, it'll provide a New Hampshire label on milk, and it'll be a premium for that label, and that those monies will go to farmers. And there'll be a budget request for that, so that'll be important. Another big issue that our members have voiced to us is crop, whether it be crop damage or crop theft, and in particular crop theft. There has been a study committee, and there's some legislation to tweak current statute to better take care of theft issues in state. And again, this is a budget year, as I mentioned, so we'll be watching that for funding for, again, the Department of Agriculture, and UNH will be important. And then lastly, there's always, not only do we advocate relative to legislation, but there's always rules being drafted and rewritten and such. And one of the examples is this year there's been a redraft of the state's wetland rules, a big redraft, and we're following that and have provided comments and not only with wetlands, but I mentioned the current use rules, and there's also in-stream flow rules, and rules always keep us busy. So with that, Aaron, I guess I'm probably getting short on time, and turn it over to the others.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob, and thanks for bearing with us during some of our technical difficulties. Thank you for being flexible there. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Sarah. Sarah, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then about NOFA and the policy work that you all are doing with NOFA.
Great. Well, I'm really happy to be participating in this webinar. Thank you for inviting us as NOFA. And to introduce myself, I'm the chair of the policy committee of NOFA New Hampshire. And I also am the owner and manager of Main Street Cheese, which is a very small goat dairy in Hancock, New Hampshire, and cheese making business. That was my original herd that's in the background there, my beloved does. Also, my work has been really influenced by being the writing assistant to Helena Norberg Hodge, who was one of the very early proponents of localizing food and countering corporate-driven globalization of food. And she worked in Ladakh in the north of India, starting back in 1974 when it first became part of India. And it had been very isolated prior to that and very self-reliant, and had a very vibrant culture and wonderful food system. And she saw, going back there every summer, how a lot of the crises we experience in the West resulted from economic changes of economic development. So the causal connections between silent structural economic changes on a wide range of areas of our lives those causal links were very clear since those changes happened in a very short time. So the ecological breakdown, the rise in ethnic friction, the community fabric eroding, people's self-determination and sovereignty around many issues in their lives, political breakdown, all of these various crises started to emerge. And so in my work, I started my cheese business as a platform to have some of these larger conversations about economic justice and our economic system. And I believe that these structures should serve life, and they're human written rules, and we can rewrite them to serve vibrant local economies with farmers at the center. So next slide, please. So NOFA has a really wonderful structure. It's a regional organization. Well, there are 7 chapters, and they all join in the NOFA Interstate Council, which is a separate nonprofit. And then each chapter does their work on the state level. NOFA Interstate Council, they have a wonderful quarterly publication, The Natural Farmer, that you get when you become a member of NOFA. And it's a really, really rich publication, wonderful articles. I highly recommend it. Each one has a different theme, each edition. And then there's the annual summer conference in Massachusetts that all the different chapters are involved in, and that's just a rich smorgasbord of so many workshops and farmers teaching people so many different practical ways of producing a wide range of crops and food products. And then there's the Interstate NOFA Policy Program, and I'm on that, and we have monthly calls, and we have a lot of allies in Washington, and as well as international allies. So it's really a great structure because food systems at the local level are really impacted by rules at the national and even international level. So we can be fluid and responsive and work at the level that's necessary. And we can also build power at the local level by linking with movements in other local areas that are trying to do the same thing. So it's really hard for one region to go it alone because we're up against big forces. So linking together with people doing similar work in other local areas is really important. So NOFA's New Hampshire's mission statement, we actively promote organic and sustainable local food systems through regenerative and ecologically sound land care, farming, and gardening for healthy communities. And we do a number of activities. We support our farmer members, but our members also are concerned eaters and gardeners, homesteaders, people who want to do organic lawn care and land management. We also have an annual winter conference. I hope you all will come. And we do statewide policy initiatives and related activities. Next slide, please. So soil has always been at the heart of organic agriculture. Many people think of organics as just that it's food grown without pesticides, but it's so much more. It's an active, proactive way to strengthen soil and our local ecosystems and watersheds. And so we've been deeply dismayed. About a year ago, the National Organic Standards Board voted by a very slim margin to allow hydroponics under the organic label. So it's not so much that we're against hydroponics, but there's such a long tradition and many practices in organic farming that have to do with building soil, and that's so key to how we produce nutritious food that we're very dismayed that hydroponics isn't allowed into the organic label. So we're having many internal conversations about how really to make sure that the integrity of the organic label continues, because our organic farmers really depend upon that in the marketplace. Next slide. So Erin asked us to focus on a couple of policies that were particularly policy areas that we're particularly interested in pursuing, and so one is that, as I've said, is healthy soils for us, and healthy biologically active soils increase our resiliency. A 1% increase in soil organic matter across 1 acre of land increases that soil's water holding capacity by 20,000 gallons. So that's helpful in times of drought as well as in times of flooding. When the soils are healthy, there's increased productivity, and this helps farmers' bottom line as well as local food security. And it's a much more efficient kind of agriculture when you have healthy soils than when you have to put in external inputs and so forth. So we have closed loops on the organic farms where we generate our own organic matter often. So next slide, please. We've been participating for the past year or so in a national network of organizations that are working on state and federal policy on healthy soils and sharing lessons learned and models and different ways of incentivizing agricultural practices with climate benefits. So that's been really wonderful that we have that network and can learn from each other and not reinvent the wheel. Next slide, please. The second issue area I want to talk about is the dairy crisis. Dairy is such a core component of a local food system. Its multiplier effect is very powerful in terms of supporting the ancillary businesses that support a dairy. So, there have been studies in the local economy movement of how many times $1 will circulate the local economy when you buy from a local bookstore compared to from a national chain. And that number of times that the dollar circulates through the economy, it's called the local multiplier. And so dairy is absolutely key in that, in our local economies. So as many of you, I'm sure, know, these statistics are from a couple of years ago. So pretty much all dairies are in crisis and losing money. For each hundredweight of milk, the farmer is currently losing $10. And at the same time, production costs are increasing. And that's pretty much across the board in agriculture, crop agriculture as well, that production costs are increasing. But with dairy, it's particularly serious because the price people are getting for milk is decreasing. I'll just skip to the end. The New Hampshire dairy industry impacts state and local economies with more than 141 million in total output, 3,717 jobs, and more than 19 million in labor income. So you see, it's so important from an economic and from many other standpoints as well to do what we can to support our dairies. Next slide, please. So we signed on to a letter from the National Family Farm Coalition in Washington submitted to the USDA, asking that they set an immediate floor price of $20 per hundredweight of milk, placing an immediate moratorium on environmental quality incentive program, funding and direct and guaranteed loans for concentrated animal feeding operations. The get big or get out, the pressure on dairies to get bigger means that the smaller ones have a harder time competing with the larger producers. And then to hold hearings on the milk pricing formula and the dairy crisis, and to implement a supply management program as outlined in the proposed Federal Milk Marketing Improvement Act of 2011. So I participated in the Dairy Summit in New York in August, which was really, really very inspiring and touching event. About 400 people were there, dairy farmers from the Midwest, and many people had come from far. And the day was really focused on what solutions exist to address the price of milk, the low price problem, and in particular on supply management. Next slide, please. So I think Peter Rossett, who was the director of Food First, he wrote a book called Food is Different, showing the ways that supply and demand mechanisms that work in other industries don't work very well when it comes to agriculture, because when supply goes up, it just encourages farmers to produce. When prices go down, they just need to produce more to make their bottom line, and that exacerbates the problem. And similarly, food is a human right, and everybody needs 3 meals a day. And so when prices go down, it isn't really necessary for people to buy more food. So it's important to have some mechanisms to intervene and not just put agriculture in the so-called free market and leave it to market mechanisms, because they don't work so well with food. And so there's a role for government intervention, and hopefully with lots of farmers at the decision-making table. And really with dairy, and so much of our agricultural system encourages overproduction, which has negative ecological impacts and viability for farmers' finances. So it's really important that we take a big picture economic analysis of what's creating these problems, because I do think that largely the root causes reside in our economic system, and we can rewrite those rules. So it's also really important that we take a holistic approach to our policy work, because food affects so many different dimensions of our lives. And so we can make alliances with people working in many different sectors, and be a very diverse movement that's oh, the slide advanced. Okay.
Yeah, Sarah, I just wanted to, I think we're going to need to move on, and I just wanted to make sure you had time to tell folks about the winter conference, and just so they had, everybody has the details here. We will definitely send this recording out to everybody who's registered, but if folks want to just check out some of the details on this slide, I think we're going to have to move on, since we have, we still need to hear from Lori, and we would also really love to give folks an opportunity to ask some questions. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'd like to welcome Lori to the presentation. Thank you for being here, Lori.
Thanks, Erin.
Great, take it away.
I'm going to take it away, and I'm going to go pretty darn quickly because I, too, want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. And I think Erin already noted that these slides will be available. So they've got some resources in them. So I'm going to fly through. I think as the initial comments stated, I am a consultant with my own consultancy for sustainable agriculture and food systems. I'm also a visiting scholar at GW Law School, and I was the first director of the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems at Vermont Law School. I'm based in Hanover, New Hampshire. So my comments today are really going to be focused on small operations, small producers, because that's what we largely have in New England and especially in New Hampshire. And I'm going to be talking today about the Farm Bill, giving you an update and why we should care about it. And I'm going to be particularly focusing on conservation. You can move forward, Erin. Great. So this is what I'm going to cover very, very quickly. Focus on small producers, like I said, why conservation in the Farm Bill matters for New Hampshire producers. But like I said, this is going to be applicable really to any small producer across the country. I think we have a few people from other places on this call. The status of the Farm Bill reauthorization, as some of you know, we are in a Farm Bill. We're the old Farm Bill, the last one, the 2014 Farm Bill's expired. And this past year or so, Congress has been struggling to pass a new Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill. And I'm going to be focusing on key conservation programs of interest to New Hampshire producers. Next slide, please. Okay, so why should we care about the Farm Bill if we're a producer, whether or not we're doing agriculture or forestry? Because it is a huge amount of money. So for conservation alone, it doesn't seem like a huge piece of this large pie. This is a Congressional Budget Office estimate of the total outlays for the Farm Bill, but it's about right. And the next Farm Bill will probably be close to this as well. So we're talking about $56 billion at least in conservation dollars. So it's incredibly important. It's our largest investment in conservation of working lands in America. So it is key. Next slide, please. All right, so I think this is just really helpful to see what states get how much money. And as you can see, the smaller states and New England states don't get nearly as much as the big row crop states, not surprisingly. However, it's a little bit misleading because we're talking about millions of dollars here. So New Hampshire doesn't fare so badly compared to the other New England states. And you can see that the major programs that people in the state avail themselves of really tend to be EQIP and CSP with some conservation easements. And I'll chat about that in a little bit. Okay, move forward, please. Okay, so if you don't know about the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, they do a really great job as a coalition builder, really advocating for small and mid-sized farmers, diversified producers especially, and organics. They follow the Farm Bill very closely and are intimately involved in the negotiations. Plus, they do a really great breakdown both before it's passed and the comparison between the House and the Senate, and both have a bill right now that they're trying to agree upon, as well as when the legislation's finally passed, they'll give a really handy breakdown, which I recommend to anybody who's a producer or an advocate for producers or foresters. Okay, so the main areas that really small farmers, depending on who you are, would be interested in are the programs that benefit beginning, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. That category of farmers and ranchers tend to get a higher cost share, sometimes total. They don't have to provide any cost share, which is very, very helpful, especially for our newer farmers who are just beginning. Conservation and environment, which is what I'm going to be focusing on. Credit and crop insurance, which is also critical. And in the last Farm Bill, really crop insurance became a better deal for small and diversified farmers. I'm hoping that we'll see some more improvements in this new Farm Bill. So it's something that I think that small producers should at least consider and get to know your local farm services agency, public servant or representative. Food safety, that was just mentioned, the whole issue of FSMA and really the pressure it's put on producers pushing the requirements for food safety down to the production level. And then local and regional food systems, which of course are just so important, and so much innovation has happened here in New England between the states, which is really wonderful, including the work that the New Hampshire Food Alliance is doing. Next slide, please. Okay, so now this is actually my area of expertise, conservation programs and technical assistance. This is really important for producers in the state because really the USDA gives financial assistance, meaning it helps pay for the majority of conservation practices on farmland or land that's in production. And that's really important. That helps make putting those practices affordable for producers and those who really care about the environment. I think this is really the key way that you can improve the environmental outcomes on your property, whether you own it or you have a long-term lease. And if you don't have a lease and you're a renter, I always recommend that you have a lease to protect your rights. Okay, so Conservation Stewardship Program. I don't think this is going to happen. We don't know what the final farm bill will look like, but the House really wanted to cut it. I'm hoping it will survive because it's a significant amount of money. It's a huge program. Again, it provides for financial assistance to install certain conservation practices for those farmers who already have practices in place. So it really rewards farmers who are good stewards to begin with. And then there's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. That's also a flagship program that's implemented by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It's one of the larger cost share programs. Again, a key provider of financial assistance. Some of you have high tunnels, may have gotten financial assistance to install those. Grass waterways, fencing, if you have livestock, it's incredibly important. And of course, as you know, fencing is expensive. So those kind of practices tend to be eligible for cost share. Conservation Reserve Program, it's a huge one out west, not so much in New England. In fact, I don't really know if it's even used in New Hampshire, which makes sense. But the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program is. I happen to be on the board of the Upper Valley Land Trust, and I know that regional land trusts or local land trusts have gotten significant funds from the USDA to help protect land. If you were a landowner and you have land in production or it's prime ag land, you don't have a conservation easement on it, you may want to consider that because it lowers the cost of the fee cost of the land, but also allows current landowners to really get some financial benefit off that property for protecting it permanently. And then there's a Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is a partnership program that producers may get involved with as really kind of sub-grantees that larger actors get together in the region and do larger kind of conservation, sometimes even watershed level stewardship programs, which is wonderful. So that's also something, I believe there's a few RCPPs in this state and possibly between Vermont and New Hampshire. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to blow through these really quickly. This is my plug for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If you don't know NRCS and you are a producer, I highly recommend you get to know your local conservation district and the NRCS soil scientist or district conservationist. There tends to be offices or at least coverage for every county in the nation. So please reach out. You can find this information online, just if you Google NRCS NH. Next slide, please. Okay, and here are the NRCS and the Farm Services Agency contacts info. Rick Elsmore is the NRCS state conservationist, and that is the link for their website. Like I said, I highly recommend you get to know them if you don't. And then the Farm Services Agency, and they're also critically important for producers because they're the ones who can help you through the loan process, crop insurance, and the Conservation Reserve Program. But like I said, although that's a big program, not so much here. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last piece of info. I told you this was going to be very quick. So the Farm Bill, we were thinking we might have one this summer. It was really steamrolling along, and then it really stalled out because of different things happening, the Kavanaugh judicial hearings. And then, of course, the elder President Bush recently passed away. And so that's really taking time on the Hill right now, as it should. But I think that the House and the Senate are very close to a compromise. SNAP is now off the table. That was a huge stumbling block. What I'm hearing from the Hill is that if they don't come together by the end of the week with something that'll be passed, then it's looking good for next week. So I'm actually hopeful. I wasn't a week ago. I think we might actually have a 2018 Farm Bill before the new Congress is in session. So keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it, Erin, if I'm correct. Slide forward. Yep, there you go. All right, I cede the floor.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori. That was a great overview. And thank you so much for being brief. I think that we probably could have had an hour-long webinar for each one of you. So I really appreciate all three of you joining us and trying to consolidate all the amazing work that you're doing into just a few minutes. We do want to give some time for folks now to ask questions. So you can either just ask a question in the chat function and we will see it there and we can repeat it and our presenters can jump back on and answer it. You can also raise your hand in the participant little pop-up window. If you wave your cursor over your name, a little hand will come up. You can wave your hand and we can unmute you if you'd like to ask your question that way. So while folks are collecting their thoughts, I also just want to put in a plug for our 2019 New Hampshire Food System Statewide Gathering. This is our 4th annual food system gathering, and this year we will be co-hosting with New Hampshire Farm to School. New Hampshire Farm to School has been doing just some amazing work, really cultivating local leadership in the communities where they've been working. And so we've decided to come together under the theme of cultivating our collective voice, really thinking about the way that we as a network can engage in policy at the local level, at the state level, potentially even at the federal level, and to learn from each other. We'll have some wonderful engaging workshops, opportunities for folks to get involved in our action teams to move forward our viability initiative, and also just to learn ways that we can work together to advocate for policies and institutions that really will support our local food economy and our local food system. So we hope you can join us. You can visit our website, the New Hampshire Food Gathering.weebly.com, and our registration page will be up there soon. So bookmark that page for us. So, so again, we'll look to see if we've got any questions. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes for folks to collect their thoughts. I want to open it up to any of our presenters. If any of you three had comments or questions for the other presenters, any thoughts or last minute things where I apologize, I had to cut some of you off. If there was anything else that you'd like to let our folks know or have questions for the other presenters, I wanted to make sure you have an opportunity to do that as well. Any questions at all?
I feel we've talked a lot. I certainly want to hear from everybody else.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. I know sometimes I think it's a lot to digest, so folks are probably taking it all in, thinking about what questions they might have. So if you have anything else you'd like to add while folks are collecting their thoughts, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
Can I, this is Erin, this is Lori.
Yeah.
Can I ask Rob a question?
Yeah, sure. Rob, are you still there? I think Rob is still here. There's Rob.
He's muted. Oh, good.
I'm gonna unmute.
Yeah, I wanted to just note something, and I was wondering if you could comment on it. My feeling is that sometimes the state farm bureaus can have a different flavor or leaning than possibly the National Farm Bureau. Like I know that, for example, Vermont Farm Bureau tends to be more moderate than some of the national policies of the Farm Bureau. So I was wondering if you could comment on that, really the bandwidth or the flexibility you have to really reflect the values of where you come from, since the agricultural production systems in New Hampshire and in New England generally are very, very different than, say, the Midwest or even the South.
Yeah, we're essentially independent as far as determining, what we're going to advocate for and against, at the federal level when it comes to our position versus what American Farm Bureaus might be. On occasion, when it does differ, they do ask us to formally to notify them. But beyond that, we stay in contact with our New Hampshire congressional officers of staff and
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. We do have a question from Nicholas. Are there any New Hampshire specific policy issues that we should know about or be talking about? So any thoughts from our presenters about New Hampshire specific issues? I know that Rob did go over a few of them, some of the policy issues. Any other thoughts? I know that Sarah talked about some dairy issues as well. Any of the presenters want to jump in with what they think are some of the really top issues that folks should be thinking about or getting involved with here in New Hampshire?
I've just started looking at the LSRs, the legislative service requests. So we're just at the beginning of going through those, but I know there will be a pollinator bill that we're going to be paying attention to. And as Rob talked about, the dairy premium bill. And then there's one that Peter Bixby is sponsoring about pesticides on school yards. Those are some that have jumped out for us in going through what the new LSRs are. But we'll definitely be keeping an eye on what's happening. And we have an e-news, and if you join, or actually you don't, you can sign up for our e-news, and we'll keep you informed of what we're looking at and thinking about. And we'd love to hear from people what your concerns are and what you care about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'd like to, since it is 1 o'clock, I'd like to thank our presenters again so much for being with us today. For any of you who are on the call and are interested in getting involved and learning more about New Hampshire food system policy, we'd encourage you to get in touch with us. We're currently sort of forming a policy working group right now, and we're going to be doing a lot of more learning at our statewide gatherings. We encourage you to come. We'll be having more webinars as well. So get in touch with us if you're interested in getting more involved. And thank you all for being here today. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks.